You're watching Fugitive Redeye, and welcome to another episode of Redeye Raw. Warning, this is going to be another one of those hot-button political social issue type episodes. So if you don't want to watch, I completely understand. And as always, if you disagree with me, that more power to you. That's how I am. You know, a thing I've noticed a lot of people do that I absolutely fucking despise, and it happens on both sides of the political spectrum, don't get me wrong, is when people pretend that their political view is not political. Yes, it fucking is. People pretend that activism, and I think that people stretch what they think is activism these days, in my eyes, burning down cities, taking over city blocks hostily, killing 30 people, attacking people in their own homes. I don't like to think of that as, activism, but some people have called it that. I sure as hell don't. But obviously BLM is a very politicized thing. People like to pretend it's not. And there's many places that have said that Black Lives Matter is not a political statement. That's how they get you. You see, while the statement itself is something I can totally get behind, because I agree with the words by their direct definition, the organization that goes by the same name takes donations. They are a real official organization. One of their founders has said they're trained Marxist. Another high-profile member has said that looting is reparations and is okay. So no, I will not stand by people saying that that is not a politicized thing. Yes, it fucking is. Maybe it shouldn't be, but neither should this. I think that people saying that, I'm personally of the belief that trying to say that, not all cops are fucking monsters shouldn't be political, because most cops I've dealt with have been fucking chill. They've all been fine. Now, granted, I've met a couple assholes for sure, and I definitely think there's corruption, especially in bigger cities. I also am against police brutality, but I also am totally fine with a police officer defending themselves. So, there's a good balance. But, despite the fact that I don't think that should be a political statement, unfortunately it is. Because the left has gone so far crazy that if you don't believe their statement that all cops are bastards, you're somehow part of a problem. Fuck you. Look, police officers are people. They do a job that nobody wants to do. Because it doesn't pay very well. They're trying to cut the funding even more. They risk their lives on a daily basis. They get hated, they get treated like shit. And because of a few bad apples, they get made to be the bad guys in, every situation, according to a certain political ideology. Fuck that. I like police. I do. I'm not 100% pro-police. Here's the thing. I have this flag, absolutely, because I stand by them and have gained a lot of respect for the ones that stay on the force during these fucking times especially. Because it's a thankless, low-paying, dangerous job where you're gonna get nothing but hate from fucking crazy people nowadays. But, despite the fact that I hold these beliefs, and despite the fact that I don't think it should be politicized, it is. It is. I'm gonna say that. Just like Black Lives Matter is. If organizations will allow Black Lives Matter and say it's not political, then neither is this. In fact, I'd argue this is even less political because, police officers don't have to be part of a political party. They're not, inherently political. There are police officers, I'm sure, that have very left-leaning views. And yet they're lumped in with everyone else. There are police officers of all races, of both genders, and, any religion, race, or creed. So it doesn't inherently mean anything when, it doesn't inherently mean they are one thing or another. All it means is they've taken an oath, they have a badge, and they have responsibility. And I feel, for the most part, people who wear that badge do it with honor. I do think there are bad apples. But here's the thing. With how many interactions they have with people, and how few of them end in death comparatively, I don't think that they're bad. I don't. And I think that, that high school where the kids were bringing this on 9/11 to honor the troops that saved lives from those towers, that wasn't a political statement because, well, if you don't respect and honor the first responders, like the firefighters and police officers, that ran into fallen, burning towers on 9/11, then there's something seriously wrong with you. Because number one, those people aren't involved in any of those current event things. This was, over almost 20 years ago. It was 19 years ago. But anyway, you get where I'm coming with this, right? If one is quote-unquote not political, then the other is not political. And I do think that, this not being political has more legitimacy simply because Black Lives Matter is a straight-up political movement. And, when people call it activism, even if I agreed it was activism, which I certainly don't, activism is inherently political. Whether or not it's good politics or bad politics, it is inherently political. It just is. Susan B. Anthony fighting for women's rights, great thing. Political movement at the time. Martin Luther King Jr. fighting for civil rights, great thing. Political movement at the time. It just was. Although it was a great thing and it brought us forward, it was a political thing. And so to pretend that these new movements, which have strayed very far from what the original goals of these movements should have been, are not political, is just dumb. They are political. But to slightly change the subject, but stay on the same track, let's talk about that stream I mentioned a while back, right? You remember my Dragon Ball Z Budokai stream, which the ending is unrecoverable. I tried to actually recover it by doing, restore previous versions. I guess that doesn't work on live streams. So unfortunately, the ending is lost forever. Now granted, I probably wouldn't have re-uploaded it because it was nothing but me and a specific commenter arguing back and forth. And no, it wasn't Corbin. Believe it or not, it wasn't Corbin. Now, I'm not going to pretend that Corbin didn't, join in the conversation. In fact, I'm pretty sure he started it by making jokes, and then someone took those jokes too seriously, because that's often what happens with Corbin. Which is one thing I miss about streams, but one thing I'm glad he's kind of settled down on, for sure. But essentially, this other viewer, who I'm not naming by name because I don't want any drama with that, started taking things very seriously, and started saying a bunch of shit I very strongly disagreed with, and I came back and started saying, well, I disagree with you because of X, Y, and Z, and he started shooting back, well, it's just common sense, and that became his argument for fucking everything, and I hate that argument, to just say, well, it's just common sense, and not even provide any backing behind that. Look, I definitely have things that I believe are common sense, but unfortunately, common sense between everyone I don't think actually really exists. Especially now, because I feel like, depending on where you fall on certain issues, you're living in a completely different world than the people who fall on the other side. And I'm not going to say which one I think is inherently right or wrong. I think it's pretty obvious which ones I do. But those are my opinions and my biases. I'm not going to pretend that I think I know all the answers. That's why I myself don't personally remove any comments because I disagree with them. I let them stay up. The only time comments get removed by me specifically are if they're a spam bot or they're like doxing someone. Those are the only two scenarios where I would, or they're linking malware, so I guess 3. However, YouTube itself does automatically remove comments that use a certain amount of offensive phrases, which is stupid because I have it set to allow all inappropriate comments. But, not only do they actually remove some of them, I've seen it happen, because I'll get a notification for a comment, click on it, and it'll say, this comment is no longer available. So that'll happen a lot. But not only that, but they also have a filter. When you have it set to top comments, which is the default, it automatically filters out comments that are potentially more offensive. So it gets really frustrating. But anyway, I strayed off topic there. What I'm saying is, when people use the common sense argument, they're saying common sense from their worldview, which I could argue the same fucking thing. And the issue that we were talking back and forth on, I think we were both very set in our ways on. The problem is, I'm a bad debater, and the person I was talking to wasn't even trying to make points. All they kept saying was, it's common sense, with no backing on why they think that either. And so what I kept doing was trying to make points, but I made some fucking awful points, because I did a lot of things that I now consider to be, okay examples, but not the best. I thought of so many better ones after I ended that stream, but it's that's not what it's about. Because, that's why I've always hated talking politics, and it's only been recently that I've actually been more comfortable doing so. But as I said, I don't intend to make this channel political. It's just Redeye Raw, anything's fair game. Here's the thing, I'm not a debater. And I'm not a very confrontational person. And if people respectfully voice differing opinions, I'll be like, yeah, fair enough. Even though I very strongly disagree with those opinions, I can be respectful. And because, number one, because free speech is like one of the most important issues to me, I think that, I'd be a hypocrite not to be like, yeah, you can hold that belief. Now, while I will say some things have been unifying over time, there's a lot of things that aren't. Like, for instance, I would say, for the most part, both people on both sides of the political spectrum are against that Netflix movie, Cuties. And I'm not really going to get into that. I have no interest in watching that, obviously, because it's fucking disgusting what they're doing with it. But here's the thing, there were a lot of critics claiming that that's a political issue, too. Is it? Do we want that to be? I don't know about that. But, I mean, I guess to some it is. And that's fucking fucked up. Because there's a lot of, critics saying that anyone who talks out about Cuties is right-wing. I've seen plenty of left-wingers talking about it, and good. It should be condemned on both sides. What the fuck? Count Dankula did a great video explaining his thoughts on it, as did many, many other people. So, I'm not going to get into that. Everyone and their grandmother has always already talked about how terrible that movie is and how awful of a thing it is to do. What a year, though. What a fucking year. We had the coronavirus, we had riots, we had wildfires, we had fire tornadoes, we had murder hornets for like a week. Nobody talks about that anymore. Had that god-awful, disgusting Netflix movie. We have an election going on right now. It's a nutty year. This year is a fucking real-life cartoon. And I'll probably get more into how crazy this year was in my end-of-year video. I think it's inevitable. At least South Park's coming back. That comes back on the 30th, and they're doing a pandemic special, so we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I guess my point is, something that doesn't seem like it should be political often can be. Because when I say something is common sense, I'm looking at it through my lens, my worldview, based on my experience, my upbringing, my environment, my knowledge based on things I've researched. And someone else is going to be looking at it through their lens, what they were brought up with, their experience and their worldview, and their knowledge and whatever research they've done. The point is, we're both looking at it from, our own little biased lens. And because of that, I don't think it's really possible to have, true common sense in everything. Because it's in the name, common sense. Because common sense would mean that we all have it in common, right? Well, because of how differing every individual is, I don't know if that's inherently possible on many big issues. There are certain things that are obviously common sense, like if I, take a swan dive into a swimming pool with no water, common sense would dictate that's a bad idea. If I run and play in traffic, common sense would dictate that's a bad idea. I think those kind of things are what we can consider to be common sense. But yeah, I think you get the point. If you disagree with what I said, more power to you. But that's where I stand on the whole issue of whether or not something is political, because I don't think one person who strongly believes something has the right to say something isn't political, simply due to the fact that they're looking at it through a biased lens. I have plenty of things myself I don't think should be political, but by today's standards certainly are. And the thing is politics have evolved over time. A lot of people act like, oh, the right don't like people who, are gay or whatever. That's not true. That hasn't been true for 10 years. And while I do think there are definitely some people with an aversion to it on the right, I'd say that it's definitely died down. And obviously with myself, I don't like to consider myself wholly right or left. I think that that's a toxic mindset. I'm very centrist with obviously a slight slant to the right. I think that that's pretty obvious. But the thing is, a lot of issues that used to be left and right issues aren't anymore. Like sexuality. I don't think anyone truly cares about sexuality. Like if someone is gay or straight. Nobody cares anymore. At least not here. But, people act like, the opposite side does. And that's just not true. I don't give a fuck what someone does, as long as they're not trying to change my life. But yeah, I've rambled on enough. Point is, I think all of us have our own bias lenses, and it's impossible to avoid them. I think it's good to try and be objective, but no matter how hard you try to be objective, at least some bias is going to be there. Anyway, that's it. Toodles.